Hello students, good morning everyone. So today we are going to discuss the enzyme catalysis. After the enzyme catalysis, zeolytic catalysis, phase transfer catalysis and nanocatalysis. These are the four catalysis we are going to discuss in the segment of this video. Let us start with the enzyme catalysis. So what are enzymes? So after we know what are enzymes, then we will move to the enzyme catalysis. So enzymes are nothing but complex proteinaceous molecules having 3D structures produced or synthesized in living organisms. So in which organisms? Living organisms, either plants or animals, whatever it may be. Enzymes are nothing but these are the complex proteinaceous molecules having high molecular mass, having 3D structure and produced in the living organisms. Okay. Now, usually these enzymes, they catalyze. What is the role of enzymes? They catalyze so many of numerous chemical reactions which are taking place in our body to maintain the biological life, metabolic life. Okay, there are so many numerous reactions are catalyzed by these enzymes. So enzymes catalyzes chemical reactions takes place in body, plant or animal, whatever it may be. They catalyze the chemical reactions takes place in the body, so that the enzymes we are calling as what? Biocatalysts. What is the other name of enzymes? Biocatalysts. Also we call it as biochemical catalysts. So what is the other names of enzymes? Biocatalysts simply as biochemical catalysts. And this phenomenon that enzymes catalyzes the numerous reactions which are taking place in our body to maintain the biological life. This phenomenon we call it as what? Biocatalysis or enzyme catalysis. Clear? Now, generally enzymes are proteinaceous molecule. You think that proteins are insoluble in the water, but these enzymes forms colloidal solutions with water. So as like other proteins, even the enzymes also less soluble, and they forms which solutions? Colloidal solutions. They forms the colloidal solutions with water, and their activity, the enzyme's activity is highly specific. Remember, it's very special, unique behavior of enzymes. So enzymes forms colloidal solutions with water, and the enzymatic activity is highly specific in nature. Okay, even though these enzymes are produced where? Produced in living organisms, in plants or animals. Even though they produce in the living organism, though themselves they are non-living. Enzymes are non-living, so that they can play the same catalytic behavior even outside the body also. Not only within the body, they also can play the same activity even outside the body. Because of which nature? Because of its non-living nature. So next important point about the enzymes are non-living. You may get the doubt. Why sir enzymes are non-living? They are produced in the living organism, then it should be living. Yes, enzymes are living as well as non-living. They are living up to they are present within the body. Once they come out of the body, it becomes non-living and they show the non-living behavior. Okay, so enzymes are non-living outside the body, so that they can play the same activity, catalytic behavior, even outside the body. Let us see a few examples of enzymes and their sources. See here enzyme, the source of enzyme, here their activity, action. Suppose if you take the first enzyme, invertase enzyme, invertase, its source is yeast. Yeast is the main source for the invertase enzyme. And what is the role of invertase? Invertase hydrolyze sucrose into glucose and fructose. To hydrolyze the starch, sucrose, sugarcane juice into glucose and fructose, we use the enzyme invertase. Next one, zymase. Zymase enzyme. Even the source of zymase is also yeast. What is the role of zymase? It converts the glucose into ethyl alcohol or ethanol. Ethyl alcohol. So because of this conversion of sugarcane juice into ethyl alcohol, okay, industrially to produce the ethanol from sugarcane juice, they use invertase enzyme and zymase enzyme. Okay, this is what we got as a fermentation of sugarcane juice. Next one, diastase. Diastase, and the source of diastase enzyme is malt, and it hydrolyzes starch into maltose. Maltose is one of the disaccharides. Sucrose, lactose, maltose, these three are what? Disaccharides. To convert the starch into maltose, we use diastase enzyme. Next one, maltase. Maltase, and its source is yeast. Yeast, and it hydrolyzes maltose into glucose. So to hydrolyze the maltose disaccharide into glucose monosaccharide, we use the enzyme maltase. Okay. Next one, urease. Urease, and its source is soybean. Soybean, and urease converts urea into ammonia. Urea into ammonia. Next one, pepsin. Pepsin, and usually the pepsin enzyme synthesized in stomach of a body. Okay, stomach. Okay, and its role is it hydrolyzes the proteins into directly amino acids. As we know, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. Okay, so the proteins are directly hydrolyzed into amino acids by the enzyme pepsin. One more enzyme is there, that is what? Trypsin. Trypsin, and its source is intestine of our body, of our digestive system, intestine. So what is the role of trypsin? It converts the proteins into polypeptides. It is not directly hydrolyzing the proteins into amino acids. First, it hydrolyzes the proteins into polypeptides. Then the polypeptides are further hydrolyzed into amino acids. Okay, so if you wanted to stop the hydrolysis of amino acids at polypeptides, you should consider the trypsin. Okay, next and the last one, that is what? Lactobacilli. Lactobacilli, and this lactobacilli, the source is curd. Okay, and it converts lactose into lactic acid. So these are few enzymes, okay, that play vital role in our life. Okay, so let us see the next, the mechanism of enzyme activity. If we see the mechanism of enzyme catalysis, they follow a special mechanism that is called lock and key mechanism. Lock and key mechanism. If you see a particular lock, for a particular lock, we can open that particular lock only with a particular key. Okay, so the key which was complementary to the particular lock only can open that lock. Okay, so similarly, even the enzyme catalysis also, the reactant molecules or the substrate molecules which are complementary to the cavities or active sites of the enzyme surface can bind with, and they converts the reactant molecules into products by the enzyme. See, if you see, I am drawing the enzyme surface first. This is the enzyme surface. Let us consider this is E, and its active site. This is the active site of enzyme. So the substrate molecules are the substrates whose shapes are complementary to the shape of enzyme. See, I am taking the substrate like this. Okay, see that this is a substrate or reactant molecules which shape is complementary to the shape of enzyme surface. Now they both combines and they forms enzyme substrate active complex. Let us see how they form. This is the enzyme surface. Now see what happened, the substrate will go and bind with the active site of enzyme surface, and they forms what? E plus S active complex. ES active complex. This is in step 1. So in the step 1, the enzyme binding with the reactant molecules whose shapes are complementary to their shapes, and they forms enzyme substrate complexes. In the next step, what happened? This enzyme substrate active complex will produce the products. So here product P, and the enzyme again coming back into the normal. Okay, finally the enzyme substrate complex is giving what? Product by coming out the enzyme as it is. Here an enzyme is actively participating, but it is coming out as it is how it was participated earlier. Okay, there was no consumption of any enzyme here. Okay, so this is what the mechanism of enzyme catalysis, and this is what we call as lock and key mechanism. Simply, this is key and this is a lock. So the keys which are complementary to the lock only can fit into the active sites of the enzyme, and they forms key lock active complex. Then they converts that into products. So this is a mechanism of enzyme catalysis. Next, move on to the characteristics. Characteristics of enzyme catalysis. The first important characteristic of enzyme catalysis is the enzyme catalyzed reactions are highly effective and efficient. So these reactions are highly effective and efficient. So what is the meaning of effective and efficient? See, by using a single molecule of enzyme, we can convert a million molecules of substrate within a fraction of seconds. Okay, one single molecule of enzyme converting million molecules of substrates into products. So it's a highly effective and efficient. Okay, so one molecule of enzyme converts million molecules of substrates into products in unit time. For example, just give an example. Let us take hydrogen peroxide, H2O2. Dissociation of H2O2 into water and the liberation of O2. And the activation energy, you know activation energy, the energy difference between the actual energy and threshold energy, that energy gap we call it as what? Activation energy. So simply I am writing here This is the threshold energy, this is the actual energy. This energy gap we call it as what? Activation energy. So the activation energy of this reaction without using any catalyst, without catalyst, okay, if there was no catalyst, what is the activation energy of this reaction? It is nearly 18 kilocalorie per mole. So what is the activation energy in the absence of catalyst? 18 kilocalories per mole. When we use the catalyst platinum, this for the same reaction, now I used the catalyst, metal catalyst, that is what? Platinum. Then the activation energy nearly 11.8 kilocalorie per mole. It is somewhat lesser than 18. So compared to the first reaction, second reaction is fast because its activation energy was less. Now in the same reaction, now I used the enzyme. In the presence of enzyme, the activation energy is just 2 kilocalorie per mole. 2 kilocalorie per mole. Because of very less and least activation energy, large number of substrates can easily converting into products. So their activity is highly effective and efficient. The first and important characteristic of enzyme catalysis is these reactions are highly effective and as well as efficient. Next characteristic of this enzyme catalysis is these reactions are highly specific in nature. The enzyme catalyzer reactions are highly specific in nature. I told you highly specific. Okay, that means one enzyme can perform only one reaction, and that enzyme cannot play any other role of any enzyme. For example, you take urease. What is the role of urease? It converts urea into ammonia. So urease enzyme converting urea into ammonia. In the place of urea, if you take methyl urea, it is a substituted urea only. But the urease enzyme cannot convert methyl urea into ammonia. The urease can converts only urea into ammonia, not any other substrates. So this reaction, the activity of this reaction, this enzyme is highly specific. One enzyme, one role. There was no multiple roles. Okay. Next, third feature of this, third characteristics of this catalysis is these reactions are the rate of enzyme catalyzed reactions are maximum, are high. The rate of these enzyme catalyzed reactions are maximum or high at optimum temperature. What is optimum temperature? Generally, any reaction if you take, if the temperature increases, generally the rate of the reactions will increases. So let us take, this is rate, this is the temperature. Now if the temperature increases, rate will increases. After it reaches a particular temperature, if you further increase the temperature, then the rate slowly decreases and it becomes zero also. So the temperature at which the rate of the reaction is highest, maximum, this temperature we call it as what? This temperature we call it as optimum temperature. Optimum temperature. So here also optimum temperature is nothing but the temperature at which the enzyme catalyzer reactions, rate of enzyme catalyzer reaction is maximum. That temperature we call it as what? Optimum temperature. Generally, for enzymes, optimum temperature is generally our body temperature. So it's nearly our body temperature 38 degrees Celsius. 38, 39. Okay, so this is the optimum temperature of enzymes. Next one, similarly, as like temperature, the rate of enzyme catalyzer reactions is high at optimum pH. Okay, so the pH, so what we call? This is called optimum pH. Optimum pH. What is optimum pH? The pH at which or below which the rate of enzyme catalytic reaction is high, okay, then that pH we call it as what? Optimum pH. Then what is the range of optimum pH? Okay, so the usual range of optimum pH is 5.7 to 7.1. When the pH is between these, then that pH is suitable for the enzymatic reactions. Generally, the rate of these enzymatic reactions is high in between this pH range. Okay, next one. These enzyme catalyzed reactions are also activated by adding some non-proteinaceous substances, and that non-proteinaceous substances we call it as what? Coenzymes. So what are coenzymes? Coenzymes are nothing but the non-proteinaceous substances which are present along with enzyme. Okay, and they activate. What is the role of this coenzyme? They activate the enzyme. That is why we are calling them as what? Activators. Enzyme activators. Enzyme activators. What are enzyme activators? The substances which activates the enzyme. Okay, so the enzyme activators we call it as what? Coenzymes. Coenzymes. Also we call it as what? Enzymatic activators. Generally, coenzymes are non-proteinaceous substances like vitamins, and activators are generally metal ions. Metal ions are generally acts as what? Activators. Here activators like what? Na plus, CO plus 2, Cu plus 2. So these all metal ions can act as what? Enzymatic activators. In the presence of these coenzymes or activators, the activity of enzyme will be increased. Okay, as like activators, enzymatic inhibitors or retarders, also called poisons, also present. So the substances which reduce the activity of enzyme or which decreases the activity of the enzyme, those substances we call it as what? Enzymatic poisons or enzymatic retarders. Okay, so enzymatic or enzyme retarders. Enzyme retarders also we call it as what? Enzymatic poisons. So what is the role of these enzymatic poisons? They kills the activity of the enzyme or they reduce the activity of the enzyme. So what are the examples? Use of some sulfur drugs. For example, you take penicillin. Penicillin is what? It's an antibiotic which we use to reduce the pneumonia. Okay, for curing the pneumonia, we use penicillin. There, the penicillin drug is acting as what? Enzyme retarder. That will go and reduce that particular enzyme, activity of that particular enzyme, so that we can cure that particular disease. So these are the characteristics of enzyme catalyzed reactions. So first one, these reactions, enzymatic reactivity is highly effective and efficient. Next one, enzyme catalyzed reactions are what? Are highly specific in nature, and the rate of these enzyme catalyzed reactions is maximum at optimum temperature and optimum pH. And optimum temperature generally is it's our body temperature range. Optimum pH is between 5.7 to 7.1, and these catalyzed reactions can be activated by adding some non-proteinaceous substances or metal ions, so called activators. And also we can reduce the activity of the enzyme catalyzed reactions by adding some substances that are called what? Enzymatic retarders, also called poisons. Next, move on to the zeolytic catalysis. Zeolytic catalysis. So this zeolytic catalysis is one type of heterogeneous catalysis. Heterogeneous catalysis. So you know what is homogeneous catalysis and heterogeneous catalysis. Homogeneous catalysis means if all substrates, products and a catalyst all are in the same physical state, then that is called homogeneous catalysis. If any one of the substrate or product or catalyst are not in the same physical state, then that is called heterogeneous catalysis. Okay, so zeolytic catalysis is what type of catalysis? It's one of the heterogeneous catalysis. Now, what are zeolites? What are zeolites? Zeolites are nothing but these are microporous crystalline porous crystalline hydrated aluminosilicates. So once again, these are porous. So if you see the appearance of the zeolites, it's like honeycomb. Have you seen the honeycomb? In a honeycomb, in the surface there is a pores on the surface. As like that, here also it's a microporous, small holes on the surface. Microporous crystalline solid and hydrated, having some number of water molecule along with aluminosilicates. Here both aluminates and silicates, both having both silicon and aluminum in tetrahedral manner. So both aluminium and silicon. Here both silicon and aluminium arranged in which manner? Tetrahedral manner. They both are arranged in tetrahedral manner. Generally 50, till now there was a 50 naturally occurring zeolites and 150 synthetically generated zeolites are available. Okay, and as we know, silicon and aluminium. Silicon is a tetravalent, valency was 4, carbon family. Aluminium is a trivalent. So these zeolites are generally formed when some of the silicon atoms are replaced by aluminium. Then the net charge over that will be negative charge. Why? Because initially Si plus 4, but if Si plus 4 is replaced by Al plus 3, one positive charge decrease. If positive charge decrease means overall charge on the complex becomes minus, negative charge. So when aluminium ions replacing Si plus 4 ions, then the net charge on it is negative charge. What is the charge over this is negative. To compensate this negative charge, to neutralize this negative charge, okay, some positive ions like H plus ions, Na plus ions are present along with this, along with the hydrated aluminosilicates. Which ions are present? H plus ion, Na plus ions are present. What is the reason? Why? Because when the aluminum ions are replacing the silicon ions, okay, the net charge on the complex is negative charge. To neutralize that negative charge, some of the positive ions like H plus ions or Na plus ions are present along with it. Okay, so to compensate this negative charge, the protons or Na plus ions are present along with it. Okay, if H plus ions are present to compensate the negative charge, if H plus ions are present along with aluminosilicates, then that silicates we call it as what? Acidic catalysts or acidic zeolites. Okay, if H plus ions are present along with aluminosilicates, what we call acidic zeolites. And these acidic zeolites mainly used in petrochemical industries for cracking higher hydrocarbons into gasoline or diesel. Okay, what is the role of acidic zeolites? The acidic zeolites are useful in petrochemical industries for cracking higher hydrocarbons into diesel or gasoline. Whereas, if Na plus ions are present along with aluminosilicates, then what we call basic zeolites. So, understood when we call acidic zeolites, when we call basic zeolites. If H plus ions are along with aluminosilicates, called acidic zeolites. If Na plus ions are present along with aluminosilicates, called basic zeolites. And the special unique behavior of this zeolitic catalysis is the zeolites are shape selective. Okay, they are shape selective, and I told you they are porous. Okay, so the active sites, what are the active? Here H plus ions and Na plus ions are only the active sites for zeolites. And these H plus or Na plus ions are present within the pores of the zeolites. As like honeycomb, I told you, in the pores of the honeycomb has like how the honeybees are present in the pores of the, are hiding in the pores of the honeycomb. Similarly, here H plus ions and Na plus ions, these are the active sites of the zeolite. They will go and present within the pores of the zeolite. So the chemical reactions are the chemical reactions taking place within the pores of the zeolite only, not outside the pores. What is the reason? Because active sites are present within the pore, so the chemical reactions also taking place within the pores of the zeolite. And this zeolitic catalysis is reactant selective, okay, transition state selective, and also product selective. Three selectivities. Zeolitic catalysis is reactant selective, transition state selective, and third one is what? Product selective. So this is reactant selective, transition state selective, and the third one is product selective. So what is reactant selective? You just imagine, I told you this is what. So just imagine this is a porous crystalline solid. It has pores. Actually, these all pores are uniform, not non-uniform. All the pores are uniform. So you take the reactant mixture. In that mixture, different sized reactant molecules are present. See, like this, like this, like this. Different sized reactant molecules are present. Only the reactants which can fix in the pores of the crystalline substance only can react here. So this is what reactant selective. Okay, because of uniform size of the pores of the zeolite, only the reactants which can easily fix into the pores of the crystalline solid only can react here. That is why this is what reactant selective. Similarly, transition state selective. Suppose if the after the reactant after the substrates are combining and they forms what? Transition state. If the transition state energy is bigger than zeolite, if the transition state energy is bigger than zeolite, then that reaction cannot take place. So the transition energy whose transition energy is similar to the zeolitic energy can react. So this is a transition state selective. And third one, product selective. Product selective. After the product formation, if the product formed here in the holes only, within the pores of the crystalline solid only, reaction will take place. If the reaction takes place within the pores, the product formation also within the pores. If the product formed, after the product formed, if the product is easily displaced or if the product is easily diffused from the pores, it's okay. Suppose in the pore, within the pore, if the product formed is bigger and that bigger product cannot easily diffuse, then in that case what it will do? It encounters. If the product cannot easily displace or diffused from the pores, in that case what the zeolite will do? It encounters the product formed. So that is why this is a product selective. So three special unique behavior of this zeolites is what? It's a reactant selective, transition state selective, and also a product selective. This is because of their shape selective nature. So zeolitic catalysis is shape selective. Shape selective nature. Okay, so this is about the zeolitic catalysis. Next, move on to the third catalysis, that is what? Phase transfer catalysis. Phase transfer catalysis. Let us take one reactant is in one solvent, for example aqueous solvent, and the other reactant is in another solvent, that is what? Organic solvent. When we mix these two solvents, the reactions between these two reactants is not possible because of their immiscible nature. Why? Because aqueous and organic solutions cannot mix uniformly and they forms two separate layers. Okay, so if one reactant is in one layer, another reactant is in another layer, how they can react? So there was a clear boundary between the two layers. So in order to react, what they should do? Either any one of the reactants should cross that boundary. Okay, but the moving of reactants or crossing the boundaries is very difficulty. In that case, what we have option? We have to add one more solvent, third solvent, which can easily miscible with both solvents. Then the reactant can easily migrating from one solvent to another solvent. But industrially, if you see, the addition of or usage of third solvent is not good economically and experimentally. Okay, so it may be some expenditure, its cost is also very high, usage of third solvent. So in that case, alternatively, we are following phase transfer catalysis. Instead of adding third solvent or instead of using any solvents, without using any solvent, by using phase transfer catalysts, we can easily migrate the reactants from one solvent to another solvent, and that catalysis we call it as what? Phase transfer catalysis. Let us take, I'm just describing this catalysis with an example so that I think you can easily understand that. So let us take RCl. Okay, here R means any alkyl group, organic octyl, cyclooctyl, cyclononyl, or whatever it may be. It's an organic substance, whatever it may be. Okay, so this is what? Organic phase. So in which phase it was? Organic phase. And for this I am adding NaCN. This is what? Aqueous phase. Aqueous phase. Organic phase and aqueous phase. You just mix both. You mix. Even if you apply very high temperatures also, even if you wait for hours, okay, is there reaction? There was no reaction. What is the reason? Here, this is an organic phase. This is what? Aqueous phase. Two layers. The reactant cannot easily cross the boundaries between them. Okay, in that case, what I am doing? I am adding a phase transfer catalyst. What is that? Quaternary ammonium salt I am adding. Or ammonium salt. Quaternary ammonium salt, that is tetraalkyl ammonium chloride. Tetraalkyl ammonium chloride I am going to use. Let us see what will happen. So this is what I am writing, R4N plus Cl minus, tetraalkyl ammonium chloride. This is using as a phase transfer catalyst. How it is doing its role, let us see. First of all, it will go to aqueous phase. Tetraalkyl ammonium chloride will go to aqueous phase. That is NaCN. This is what? Aqueous phase. And tetraalkyl ammonium ion, it will react with the cyanide ions of aqueous phase. Why? Because they both are aqueous phase. Now it is an aqueous phase. It takes the cyanide ion, that is R4NCN, N plus Cn minus. Now it is an aqueous phase only. It takes the cyanide, it carries this cyanide ions and migrates to organic phase. And migrates to organic phase. Now in organic phase, R4NCN is there. R4N plus Cn minus. This is an organic phase. In organic phase, what is the RCl is there, right? So it combines with RCl, and they forms. Now they both are in organic phase. Now they will react with each other and they forms RCN, R plus and Cn minus, RCN, and remaining is what? R4 N plus Cl minus. Now the reaction RCN formation takes place now. Here RCN formation not takes place. RCN not takes place, but here RCN formation taking place. Simple logic. Because of using this tetraalkyl ammonium salt, it carries the cyanides from aqueous phase into organic phase. And at organic phase, it further reacts with the other reactant and they produce the product. Okay, so it is transforming. For example, just imagine two states, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Okay, there was a border. What it will do? There was no transport facility. At that time, what they do? Few vehicles bringing the people from Karnataka to border, and at border, few vehicles. They allow only few vehicles. That vehicles brings that people from Karnataka border to Tamil Nadu border. Okay, just crossing the border. Thereafter, they move to the Tamil Nadu. Same like what is happened in the border. Similarly, trialkyl ammonium chloride is using as what? Phase transfer catalyst. Okay, so this is what? Phase transfer catalysis. And the last one is nanocatalysis. I just briefly give you what is nanocatalysis. Some of the metal nanotubes or metal oxides, okay, are using as nanocatalysts. And these nanocatalysts, there is a speciality now. Nanocatalyst can act as both homogeneous as well as heterogeneous catalysis. Nanocatalysis can show the behavior of both homogeneous catalysis and heterogeneous catalysis. How it is showing the homogeneous catalysis? As like homogeneous catalysis, the efficiency or the product yield is 100% to the nanocatalysis. Why? Because homogeneous catalysis efficiency or yield is 100%. As like homogeneous catalysis, even the nanocatalysis efficiency and their product yield is also 100%. As like heterogeneous catalysis, the catalyst is recycled and reused. So the nanocatalysis is showing the behavior of both homogeneous and as well as heterogeneous catalysis. In fact, nanocatalysis is nothing but soluble heterogeneous catalyst. It is a soluble heterogeneous catalyst, and the best example, conversion of lindane into cyclohexane by using a bimetal, that is what iron lead. Okay, lindane to cyclohexane can be done by the using of nanocatalyst. So this is about the nanocatalysis. I hope you understood this catalysis. Okay, in the next video we will continue that what? Colloidal solutions. Until then, take care. Bye bye.